Today, I want to talk about how most everything I learned about retirement, I learned in my 50s. Retirement didn't always seem possible for me, especially since I didn't get really serious about saving for retirement until I turned 50. But I have learned so much along the way, and I have been able to turn things around. Now I am here so I can share those lessons with you, and I can help you transform your future as well, no matter where you're starting from. I've been saving in 401ks most all of my adult life, but all I really knew about them was what I'd learned from various HR departments at the companies I worked for. So, needless to say, I knew the bare minimum. And speaking of bare minimum, since most of my 20s, 30s, even into my 40s, I was living paycheck to paycheck. So that's pretty much what I was putting into my 401k, the bare minimum. And what's even worse is I cashed out my 401ks two separate times when I changed jobs. I never really knew what my money was even invested in within the 401ks. I mean, I would get my monthly statements and I would look at them and basically just look at the balance and think about it for maybe 5 minutes and then move on with my day. But when I turned 50, things changed. I got serious about saving for my retirement. It became kind of a hobby for me. I needed to make up for all the years of not saving enough and make the years ahead of me work extra hard for my money. So I got busy. I got busy reading everything I could get my hands on, listening to every podcast, audiobook. Okay, the number one thing I learned was I had to stop withdrawing from it. These accounts had to become off limits. Learning this was better late than never. But I put it at the top of the list because that is the quickest thing that can derail and put your retirement savings in a major hurting. Number two on the list is I educated myself on what investing aggressively versus conservatively really meant. As I said earlier, I had no idea what my 401k was invested in. I'm sure that I just put it in whatever the HR department or whatever financial advisor the company used, whatever they told me to put it in. Now, when I turned 50, that all changed, and I realized that I had to start leaning and depending more heavily on investing in stocks because stocks, of course, can give you a lot more growth. Now, there is more risk involved with it, of course, but over the long haul, the stocks are going to give you the most growth for your money. I also learned about target date funds and what those consist of. And based on a year of when you think you may want to retire, say 2030, they'll have a target date fund. A lot of these 401ks, brokerage companies, that will be titled 2030 target date fund or 2035. And based on the years that you have left, that's how they will automatically invest your money. And if you have a lot of years ahead of you, then they'll invest it more aggressively. I only put a portion of my money in a target date fund because, as I had said earlier, I wanted to make up for lost time and make up for the mistakes I had made in the past. So I didn't want some of my money slowing down just because I was getting closer to retirement. So I only put a portion in a target date fund, and then I put the bulk of it in a fund that's a little more aggressive overall. Number three on the list, I discovered the Roth IRA. Yes, that did not happen until I reached my 50s. The Roth IRA came out in 1998, which I would have been in my 30s at that time. Not real interested in retirement information at that age. Now, fast forward 20 years, and I think they are one of the best vehicles that you can use for your retirement. Now, what makes a Roth IRA different than your 401k? Your 401k, more than likely, you put your money in there before you pay taxes on it. When you retire and start withdrawing from that 401k, you'll have to pay the taxes on it then. A Roth IRA, you'll deposit money into that after you've paid your income taxes on it. So all through the years, your Roth will grow tax-free, and when you withdraw it in retirement, also all your withdrawals, all your earnings, everything is tax-free at that point. So whatever your balance is in your Roth, that is the balance that it's going to be when you start retiring. Now in your 401k, you'll have to take out 10, 15, 20%, whatever your tax rate might be when you retire, and none of us really know what that might be. One of the obstacles for me in opening a Roth, or even being aware of what it was that it wasn't offered at any of my jobs. It's something that required me to go out of my way to go find a brokerage firm that I could open a Roth account with, which isn't really a big deal at all, but it was something that didn't come automatic at my place of employment, so it must not be necessary. And why create extra work for something that I knew nothing about? But once you get the account opened and set up, you can set up automatic contributions to it just as easily as you do with your 401k. Number 4, I discovered in my 50s that I could go to the socialsecurity.gov website, set up an online account, and I could go in there and see all of my Social Security earnings. I could see all of my earnings from the very beginning of my very first job in 1983, all through the years. You can also find out how much your Social Security checks are going to be whenever you choose to retire. You can play with the ages, whether you want to claim at 62 or 65 or 67. Number 5 on the list, in my 50s, I discovered how to avoid a big tax bill just by contributing to my retirement accounts. Now, most of my working life, doing my taxes has been very, very simple. I never itemized. I always qualified for the easy form until I reached my 50s. My knowledge of taxes and how to minimize them was virtually non-existent. But as I entered my 50s, things got a little more complex. And one particular year, I was caught off guard. I had a side hustle. I also had gotten a bonus. There were a few things that had inflated my income for that year. I also get my health insurance through the exchange. I get the Obamacare health insurance, and your premium for that insurance is based on what you're going to make for the year. And since I underestimated how much I was going to make due to unforeseen things, when I filled out my taxes that following year, all of the credits that I had gotten on my healthcare premiums, well, the government wanted all of that back in one big lump sum. And it was not pretty. It was several $1,000s. But I did some research. And as I say, I was starting at ground zero here. I had no information regarding this. I learned that I could contribute to a traditional IRA, and all the money that I would contribute into that up to the maximum would offset my taxable income, which would make my tax bill a lot lower. And I would much rather put that money in an IRA for my future than to give it to the IRS. So by the time I did that, my tax bill dropped down to several $100s instead of several thousand. I could manage that a lot better. Now you may say, well, you're going to have to pay taxes on that money eventually. Well, true. However, there is one little benefit that I'll mention a little bit later in the video that actually will keep me from having to pay taxes on that as well. Okay, number 6 on the list, I discovered an HSA, a health savings account. Now, I have talked a little bit about HSAs in some of my other videos, and there's some really good information online that describes what an HSA is. So I'm not going to go into all of the details of that here. But the first thing is you need to find out if you're eligible to contribute to an HSA. And the way to find that out is to contact your health insurance carrier, and they can tell you immediately whether or not you're eligible to contribute to one. After you've discovered whether you're eligible for one, you could check with your HR department if you do have a place of employment. They may have HSA accounts set up there where they can just take the contributions directly from your paycheck. Now, if your place of employment does not have that, like mine doesn't, you can open an HSA account on your own. Now, here's what makes an HSA really great. They have a triple tax benefit. So every dollar that I put in my HSA, I get to claim on the next year's tax form that will reduce my taxable income. The money grows tax-free over the years, and then when I retire, when I withdraw that money to pay for medical expenses or health expenses, then it's tax-free as well. But I mentioned to you in the previous point that I found that there is a benefit that many people don't know about. And I did not learn about this until a couple of years ago, that you can use a once in a lifetime benefit of taking money out of a traditional IRA and rolling it over to an HSA. Now, of course, you have to stay within the annual maximum, and it varies based on your age. So we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here, but something akin to $5,000. You can roll that over to the HSA once in a lifetime, and then you never have to pay taxes on that money. So that IRA that I opened a few years back to help me out of my huge tax bill, I was able to roll that over to my HSA last year, and now I never have to worry about the taxes on that. The seventh thing that I learned in my 50s is that I have to increase my liability insurance coverage to protect my growing nest egg. Did you know that if you're in a car accident or if you are sued, that your retirement assets are at risk? Now, there is a law that protects 401k balances from lawsuits like this, but that law only protects you while you're still working for that company. Once you've retired, that 401k balance is just as vulnerable as any of your other accounts. And there are no laws to protect your savings and checking accounts, your IRAs, against lawsuits or judgments. So here is what I learned. I had to look at my home and auto insurance, and what I had was just the state minimums for liability coverage. It wasn't very much at all. And at the time, even my small nest egg exceeded that amount. So I was leaving myself vulnerable to it. So I had to increase my limits to at least exceed the amount that I have in my retirement accounts and my other assets. And this is something that you'll have to do as your nest egg grows. But it doesn't cost that much each level up that you go. It's not very much extra on your premiums. And surprisingly, this is a protection that I knew nothing about a few years ago. Okay, number 8. I never paid much attention to catch-up contribution limits. One, I never thought of myself as being old enough to be eligible for them. Let me tell you, turning 50 can sneak up on you. Another reason I never paid much attention to them is I wasn't putting anywhere near the maximum amounts in before I turned 50. So it didn't matter what the maximum amounts were after I turned 50 because I probably couldn't put that much in anyway. But with HSAs and IRAs, the maximum limits are pretty small. So having a little bit extra that you can put in starting in your 50s does matter a lot. For IRAs, the maximum limit under 50 years old is 7,000, but you get to put an extra 1,000 in if you're over 50. With HSAs, it's a little bit different. The age is actually 55, not 50, but you can put in an extra 1,000 on top of the $4,150 a year amount. So don't let these important age milestones pass you by. If you can afford to put extra in, then pay attention to those birthdays on your calendar. Okay, number 9 on the list. I was in my 50s before I ever heard anything about the 4% rule by William Bengen. Now, to briefly describe to you what I'm talking about, William Bengen in the 1970s, I believe, he ran tests, hundreds, if not thousands of tests on retirement account balances on what would be a safe withdrawal percentage to not run out of money over the course of a 30-year retirement. And he came up with the oh so famous 4%. Now, I believe now he's changing that a little bit, but he's always going to be known for the 4%. And if you only withdraw 4% from your total retirement balance, and you can adjust that for inflation each year, then the odds of you running out of money are extremely low. In fact, you may end up with more money after the course of 30 years by only withdrawing that 4%. Now, there's been a lot of discussion over this theory over the decades. Some agree with it, some don't. Others feel that the number needs to be adjusted, and even Mr. Bengen himself has adjusted that recently. And regardless of whether I would use the 4% rule in my own situation, I still find it very interesting. You can use spreadsheets or online calculators just to kind of play around with the percentages on your own and see how that affects your money over the course of a 20, 30-year retirement. Although it does help with that fear of being afraid that you're going to run out of money before you die, I still feel like it leaves too much money unspent to really suit my preferences. But I'm still trying to figure it out, how to find a balance on making my money last as long as possible and then being able to spend it as well. I think that's a conundrum for a lot of us. And the 10th thing that I discovered in my 50s is that life insurance is pretty much useless if there is no one in your life that depends on you. Now, if you've had life insurance for years, it's easy to just be on autopilot, just keep paying the premiums, thinking, well, everybody is supposed to have life insurance. But if there is no one in your life that depends on your income, such as a minor child or a spouse, then you don't need it. Now, you may want to have it, and if you can comfortably afford the premiums as you age, then keep it, but you don't need it. And if you have enough money to cover your death expenses, your funeral, your burial, then you don't need it for that either. So there you go, a decade of retirement learning. Do I feel like I know everything there is to know about retirement? Far from it. I learn more every day. But that's because I'm out there looking for that knowledge. I'm seeking it. I am still listening to those podcasts. I'm still reading those books. We spend a huge chunk, hopefully, a huge chunk of our lives in retirement. And it's the last stages of our life that we can actually plan for. So we owe it to ourselves to get as much knowledge as we can for this. Now, if you liked this video, I would love for you to subscribe to my channel. And I have another video that you may like as well. Be boring in your 50s so you can retire in your 60s. I'll have that linked right here. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you again soon. Bye.